Are you 100% confident that the president never once asked Michael Cohen to do anything but tell the truth to Congress?
100% certain of that. Categorically, I can tell you, his counsel to Michael Cohen throughout that entire period was tell the truth. As far as I know, President Trump did not have discussions with him, certainly had no discussions with him in which he told him or counseled him to lie. If he had any discussions with him, they'd be about the version of the events that Michael Cohen gave then, which they all believe was true. I still believe he may have been telling the truth when he testified before Congress. But in any event, his lawyers thought that, our lawyers thought that, and the president thought that at the time.
Can you share?
Now I don't know what to believe about him.
You just acknowledged that it's possible that President Trump talked to Michael Cohen about his testimony.
Which would be perfectly normal, which the president believed was true.
So it's possible that that happened, that President Trump talked to Michael Cohen.
I don't know if it happened or didn't happen, and it might be attorney-client privileged if it happened, where I can't acknowledge it. But I have no knowledge that he spoke to him.
That was really interesting. Hello, everyone. I'm Candace Gibson at MSNBC headquarters in New York City. There were a number of really interesting revelations today from the president's lawyer. Rudy Giuliani went on a Sunday media blitz to take sort of a victory lap. Now, it comes after the special counsel issued a rare rebuke of a BuzzFeed report that Trump directed Michael Cohen to lie to Congress about the Trump Tower Moscow project. But Giuliani may have thrown Trump under the bus today when he admitted that discussions on the Moscow project continued throughout 2016, even up to the presidential election, months later than previously known.
Can't be sure the exact dates, but the president can remember having conversations with him about it.
Throughout 2016?
The president also remembered. Yeah, probably up to, could be up to as far as October, November. Our answers cover until the election.
With me now, Glenn Kirshner, the former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Also, Katie Phang, the attorney and MSNBC legal contributor, and Craig Unger, investigative journalist. He's also the author, I should note, of the book, House of Trump, House of Putin. And Craig, I do want to start with you because your book talks about a relationship that the president and Donald Trump had with Putin going back for decades.
Right. When we talk about the Trump-Moscow project, it's important to remember this goes back more than 30 years to 1986. And at the time, Trump had just, according to the state attorney general of New York, had actually started laundering money. His real estate was laundering money for the Russian mafia. And in 1986, Russian ambassador to the Soviet ambassador to the UN, this is back in the Soviet days, went into Trump Tower, met with Donald Trump, said, there's a terrific building here, the glitziest building in New York. We want one in Moscow. And that's when Trump Tower Moscow began.
So no surprise to you that they might have been having dealings straight up until Election Day?
Not at all. I mean, but what is interesting is if you talk about Donald Trump being a Russian asset, which is a very, very important thing, you have to go back to the beginning and see where it began. And during that trip, a KGB general told me that he believes Trump was first the subject of compromise, sexual compromise.
How interesting was that Rudy Giuliani sound from earlier today?
I don't know if I use the adjective interesting. We're talking about compromising, you know, compromising your client, Donald Trump.
I mean, but he did sort of speak in a bit of a circle there, as you saw from that mashup.
Giuliani does talk in circles, and there's a reason why. He's, you know, the surrogate for the Trump team. He's out there, he's talking about these things, and he's trying to, you know, say what the theory is, but legally he's walking his client into legal quicksand. I mean, the under his money, and he wanted to get some profit out of this, and that's the reason why he had dealings with Russia up until the election.
And Glenn, you're a former federal prosecutor. You're well familiar with this. What Rudy Giuliani did today? Did he get his client in a little bit of hot water?
You know, not legally speaking, because, listen, an attorney's statements about his client, ever-changing though they might be, are ultimately never going to see the inside of a courtroom or the inside of an impeachment hearing, because sort of the sins of the attorney are not often the sins of the client. Now, look, the sand is forever shifting under Giuliani's feet, and he can never really stand up straight and give one consistent version of anything over time. And he's not doing his client a service, but I think at the end of the day, all of Giuliani's statements are much ado about nothing because we can't credit any of them. We really have to wait and see when Mueller lays his cards on the table what exactly he has found.
And is it really a big deal if the president was trying, or Donald Trump was trying to have a tower in Moscow? Why these changing timelines?
Well, absolutely. If he stands to make $300 million, as the BuzzFeed article said, over one project that can be okayed by only one person, Vladimir Putin, then he is indebted to America's, the chief leader of America's biggest foe.
And that's the troubling part for you?
Well, yeah, because I have a problem with the fact that Michael Cohen is being called a liar. And he's admitted he's a liar. Yeah. But Michael Cohen has now said, I'm telling the truth. There was contact beyond January of 2016. And you now, listen, the thing that Glenn says is true. Attorneys make arguments for their clients. But if that is not truth, if what Giuliani is saying is not accurate about what Trump's position is, then why won't Donald Trump talk to Robert Mueller? Why won't Donald Trump himself deny the allegations that are being made? He sends somebody like Rudy Giuliani out there to make his statements for him. And I think you're imputing these statements to your client, which is Donald Trump.
And Glenn, what do you make of the special counsel's rebuke of the whole, their Mueller rebuke of the BuzzFeed article?
Well, Candace, here's what I make of it. And I don't know that I've heard anybody say this, but it's actually a very good day for America when the special counsel who is investigating Trump-Russia collusion and conspiracy sees a report in the media that is very, very critical, indeed damning of the president, saying that the president told Cohen to lie to Congress, and something that Bob Mueller has discerned during his investigation tells him that is inaccurate. He doesn't just let it linger out there. Instead, he stands up and corrects the record in a way.
But there are so many other things that are lingering out there.
Yeah, but here's why I think this one gets special attention by Mueller. Here's why I think he kind of played it the way he did. It got so much traction politically when we saw this blockbuster reporting by BuzzFeed that people started talking a little bit more enthusiastically about impeachment. Let's assume that this became Article 1 of the Articles of Impeachment, and then it was later determined that it was inaccurate, it was wrong, it was misleading. Wouldn't that impact what everybody else thought about an impeachment investigation moving forward? I think Bob Mueller did the right thing. I think it continues to show that he is a guilty person's worst enemy and an innocent person's best friend.
Interesting take right there. Thanks to Glenn Kirshner and my panel, Craig Unger and Katie Fang, are going to stay with us. But still ahead, Democrats are calling the president's latest offer for his border wall a non-starter. So what now? The latest on the government shutdown. But first, Saturday Night Live's takes a shot at the negotiations, or lack thereof.
$1 billion, and you say Nancy's my mommy.
It's not $5 billion, and I need $5 billion because that's the first random number I said. No deal.
What the president proposed yesterday, increasing border security, looking at TPS, looking at the Dreamers, I'll use that as a starting point, but you've got to start by opening the government.
It was disappointing to see Speaker Pelosi reject the offer before the president gave his speech. I mean, look, the president is offering a solution. And what we have from Democrat leadership so far is just sound bites.
What we're trying to get the president to understand is we'll sit down and work this out. But, you know, we all are adults, and you can't treat Democrats like something else.
Just seem like they're talking past each other, doesn't it? Day 30 of the partial government shutdown, with Democratic leaders rejecting President Trump's new border proposal. Despite that, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he plans to introduce the president's plan this week. And some 800,000 furloughed federal workers are facing their second missed paycheck coming up on Friday. NBC's Jeff Bennett is at the White House, and Mike Vaccaro is on Capitol Hill. And Mike, the president targeting Nancy Pelosi today in his morning tweets.
Yeah, that's right. He's working his fingers to the bone on the Twitter machine this morning, really going after Nancy Pelosi. Of course, a longtime Republican foil, and President Trump, obviously now his main adversary, as this shutdown is obviously in record territory, now stretching into its 30th day. Just a sampling now of the 3 consecutive tweets that the president directed at Nancy Pelosi. He calls Nancy Pelosi and the Dems. They don't see crime and drugs at the border. They only see 2020. And another one, he says Nancy Pelosi has behaved so irrationally. She's gone so far left. She's now become a radical Democrat. And finally, Nancy, he says, I'm still thinking about the State of the Union, and then concludes, I'll get back to you soon. Remember, of course, Nancy Pelosi almost disinvited him. It's a little unclear. It's up to the Speaker to invite the president to address a joint session of Congress. The date was set for January 29th, although Pelosi spokesman Drew Hamill says today in response to the president that there was no written agreement of any sort. So actually, that's kind of up in the air. Yet another unusual circumstance of where we are today in this shutdown now threatening to stretch into February. Mitch McConnell hitting send on an email, a statement to the world yesterday as soon as the president finished his remarks from the diplomatic room, says he'll take up the president's package on the Senate floor this week. That in itself is news. The Senate wasn't even supposed to be in session this coming week. Unclear, probably improbable that McConnell's going to be getting very far. He's going to need that 60-vote threshold, that filibuster-proof threshold, to even begin debate on it. It's unlikely he's going to get it. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi, House Democrats, they control things over on that side of the Capitol. She vows once again to send the Senate spending bills that would reopen the government. And of course, it need not be said that before Christmas, the Senate unanimously passed a bill that would do just that until February 8th, until all of this stuff about the wall got worked out. So you're absolutely right, Kendrick. There's a lot of movement. The problem is that people are still moving in different directions, Kendrick.
Yeah, we're almost making it to February 8th itself. Turning now to Jeff at the White House, where the president was tweeting on a variety of topics, as Mike alluded to. And this was the epitome. We expected a storm this weekend, but this was a different sort of storm.
Yeah, look, we're getting a window into what's on the president's mind today. Today, by the way, marks the halfway point of Trump's first term. It's the second anniversary of his inauguration. But as you mentioned, yeah, he's all over the place in these tweets. He's talking about North Korea, the economy. He talks about the winter weather. He says, be careful, try staying in your house. He's needling Nancy Pelosi, as you and Vic just talked about. And then, Candace, he hit us with this one. He says, wow, just heard that my poll numbers with Hispanics has gone up 19% to 50%. That is because they know the border issue better than anyone. And they want security, which can only be gotten with the wall. Well, look, President Trump has the number right, but the poll he cites, the NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, does not say why his numbers have, in fact, ticked up. You can see the president make the direct link between Latinos and immigration, although, since I guess it needs to be said, Hispanic Americans are not single-issue voters when it comes to immigration. In fact, a Pew survey shows that Hispanic Americans say they care more about jobs and the economy, education, healthcare, care more about those things than immigration. So that, Candace, is your Trump fact check of the day.
But it was also kind of tough to lump all Hispanic Americans in together because they're so fragmented into different...
No group is a monolith.
Absolutely. NBC's Jeff Bennett there and Mike Vicari. You get the sense, though, that Nancy Pelosi has now made it to a different end now with just Nancy being used, like Beyonce. All right, gentlemen, thank you. Joining me now, Basil Smilke, the Democratic strategist and former executive director of New York State Democratic Party. Also, Noah Rothman, MSNBC contributor and associate editor at the Commentary magazine. Kwame Jackson, News One contributor and former Apprentice contestant. And Katie Fang is back with us, our MSNBC legal contributor. The desk got a little bit more crowded. Our thanks to you guys for all being here with me. We're going to start with Noah out there on the far end. So the president said that this was an olive branch. This was a compromise. But they didn't negotiate with anybody else for this compromise.
No, they're negotiating with Republicans, which is sort of appropriate because it was a Republican-inspired event, this shutdown. I kind of think this was a savvy move on the part of the president, not just because he's demonstrating a willingness to back down from his original position, which will play with the public, but it exposed what a farce this entire thing is. The president's supporters who now are in opposition to this, say it's an amnesty, are acknowledging that the wall is not on the table, that this $5 billion is not the wall. It's not the wall we wanted. It's not the one we're getting, and what the president is asking for isn't what we want. On Nancy Pelosi's side, she's
a steel fence.
It's a steel fence in that Nancy Pelosi's slats. And Nancy Pelosi has said that this is a non-starter. However, she appears to say she would entertain a deal like what was proposed last February to extend a pathway to citizenship for DACA. Now, if the wall is an immorality, and it is a non-starter, then we're also entertaining the prospect of a grand bargain, which would allow this immorality, this thing we cannot possibly entertain, to be constructed. Again, these are negotiating positions, and this has exposed how everybody's positions
are. Are we moving at all? It's a negotiation means that there are people talking from both sides. It doesn't appear as if that's happening.
Yeah, we're in an intractable light right now. I mean, we're in a position, I feel as though, in invoking Martin Luther King, since his holiday is tomorrow, he once said that nothing is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And that's what we're facing right now. We're facing a president that knows that it is an ignorant statement to think that we're going to protect the border from drugs and illegal immigrants when we're not focused on ports of entry. It's conscientious stupidity to think that what we're trying to construct through this spending of $7.7 billion is going to be effective.
No, and it's interesting because I will take something that you said and believe and agree with it to some extent. I do think that the president has moved. I mean, listen to his language. He's gone from the wall to border security to something else. So I think the Republicans are feeling the pressure.
So the semantics of it.
The semantics of
what
it.
he's calling.
But that's my point, because at the heart of it is still this pernicious sort of language and mindset toward people of color and toward immigrants. And this is also part of why Democrats can't vote for the wall. At least the leadership it will be difficult for them to support any deal that has a wall in it, because it's really a proxy for, again, all of that racism and xenophobia that comes from the White House. But it's still a tough deal, though, because DACA is very important to our base.
So this wasn't a compromise, though. This was a capitulation.
They're extending DACA for 3
years. No, but that does nothing, because the Supreme Court said we're not even going to take it up this term. So DACA, by default, gets extended for another 10 months. And here's the thing. The reason why it was a capitulation is you got 800,000 federal workers that are about to hit their second non-pay. So Trump is getting pressure. He's getting pressure from his base, because his base is not defined just by certain people. So you've got 800,000 people that aren't getting paid, that were not acknowledged at all yesterday. But the reality is TPS, he ended TPS, he ended DACA. So now he's saying, I'll give it back to you? Well, that's a different version.
Well, he creates the crisis that he thinks he's going
to solve. And he's also getting pressure from the polls. His approval rating has dropped from 42% to 39% from December to January. That same poll was the one that said Hispanics support him by 50% right now, and 57% of people blame the president for this shutdown still.
Yeah, it demonstrates a fair lack of competence in government, and I think that probably plays very poorly with the public. To Katie's point, which I think is probably very important, is that the president has shown a lot of this movement. He's demonstrating that he's willing, at least in rhetorical terms, to back off his position, and now he's offering this capitulatory compromise, and Democrats haven't moved a bit. They have been stolid and 100% united in opposition to this shutdown. Why would they move now? They're going to just wait for Donald Trump to eventually give in his entire position and give up on the wall.
But they run the risk of being seen as stubborn, no?
They do, and I think that the president is waiting for that to happen, and it could happen, but I think the Democrats are playing a more savvy game, waiting for the public to say we're no longer going to take this shutdown.
And we're forgetting kind of the intransigence and the power of the two mouthpieces of his base, so Rush Limbaugh and Coulter, who were kind of infuriated.
And Coulter hated this.
Yeah,
it was like nails on the chalkboard, amnesty, right?
Yes, and Coulter came out pretty quickly after the president's speech and said this is...
So he's being pulled, by both directions, trying to find a middle ground with his base.
Democrats do risk being seen as intransigent if they don't come towards the president's position a little bit. But again, the shutdown is weighing far more heavily on the president, as it should.
And at what cost? Because again, if we look like we're entertaining this wall and then spend this money to support this wall, it's going to cost us with our base. It's going to cost us with a lot of those progressive members that came in 2018 that are looking to pull Nancy Pelosi in particular, but the party more to the left.
You got to admit the shutdown is hurting a lot of the Democratic base.
It's hurting people broadly. And let's just be clear about that. It's hurting people broadly. It's hurting our economy. It's hurting 800,000 or more Americans. But I do think that what we like to see is the fact that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are standing firm.
Yeah. Nobody wins. Compromise is the lubrication of democracy. We all know that. So let's lubricate the machine.
story.
All right.
I will leave that alone. My mind goes into different places. It'll just leave that as is. No, not at all. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Still ahead, and Katie, still ahead. President Trump says Democrats are going to lose in 2020. New poll numbers may be showing a different story.